Hi and welcome to another gamer video, and in today's video I want to talk about Switch 2 games on a Nintendo Switch. Did you know that you could play some Switch 2 games on the original Switch? Because I didn't. So I'm going to take a quick look at the different kind of Switch cartridges or Switch 2 cartridges. So games that are made for the Switch, they're on the black cartridges. That's pretty straightforward. They're designed for the Switch. You can put them in a Switch 2 and play them. But then we move to Switch 2 cartridges, and well, they're red. So you've got your general Switch 2 cartridges, which have the game on. And then you have these Switch 2 key cards, which they haven't really got the game on. They're just, well, it's got a piece of information. You put it in, it downloads the game. So you do need the key card to play the game, but the game isn't actually on there. It's downloaded. There are some mysterious Switch 2 cartridges that can work in a regular Switch, even though they are red Switch 2 cards, and they've got the Switch 2 branding. The case has got the Switch 2 branding. So I was watching a video by a YouTube channel called Spawnwave, and I'll put a link to their video, but they explain it in full. Switch 2 cartridges, some of them, can be played on a regular Switch, and it's down to the code that you see on the actual cartridge itself. So if the code starts with LB, then it is a Switch 2 only game. It can only be played on a Switch 2. The same as if it's got LP, then it's a Switch 2 game keycard, and they can only be played on a Switch 2 as well. But then you get these carts that start with LN, and these are cross-gen cartridges, so they look like Switch 2 cartridges. They've got the colouring of the Switch 2 cartridge. The case has got the Switch 2 sort of logos all over it, but they are technically Switch games with the Switch 2 upgrade on it. So you put it in a Switch, it plays the Switch version. You put it in a Switch 2 and it will install the Switch version and then patch it with the Switch 2 upgrade. Whereas you can buy just the Switch version, which will come on a black cartridge in the usual style of a Switch case. And then if you put that in a Switch 2, you'd have to pay for the upgrade. One example is Pokemon ZA. If you buy the Switch version, you put it in a Switch and it plays the Switch version. If you then put that in a Switch 2, you've got to pay for the Switch 2 upgrade. If you buy Pokemon ZA for the Switch 2 and you put it in a Switch 2, that's it. It's there. But if you put it in a Switch, you can play it. Really, I would say that these are not exactly Switch 2 games. They are Switch games bundled with the Switch 2 upgrade. Technically, really, they should come as a Switch game in a black cartridge, in a Switch case. But they're not. They're branded as Switch 2. So you can put some of these red Switch 2 cartridges in your Switch and play the game. Not all of them. You need to look at the code. I can't remember if the code is also on the back of the case or whether it's just printed on the cartridge itself, but LB means they are Switch 2 only. LP means they are Switch 2 game key cards. That is Switch 2 only. And if it says LN, then it's cross-gen. It will have both the Switch and the Switch 2 game on it. And it's not something that generally happens. And we've had these kind of forward compatibility once or twice. Neo Geo Pocket. If you bought a Neo Geo Pocket Color game, you could play that in mono on a Neo Geo Pocket. The same with the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color. There were some games that were Game Boy Color, and you could only play them on the Game Boy Color, but you could play all of your Game Boy games on a Game Boy Color. If it was a grey cartridge, it was a standard Game Boy game. If it was a clear cartridge, it was a standard Game Boy Color game. But there were these black cartridges in the middle that would play in colour on a colour system, or in mono on an original Game Boy or Game Boy Pocket. So just a little bit of a tip there. There are 3 types of Switch 2 cartridge: LP, LB, and if you get one with LN, you can play that game on a Switch. I hope that helps. I found that quite interesting. Like I said, I got this from Spawnwave, so go and check out their video. Link, like, subscribe, enjoy.